Okay, Apple has totally revamped their MacBook lineup. They dropped the price from $2,000 to $1,599 on the 14-inch model and completely got rid of the old 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro model. And I know that this new cheaper price is going to attract a much larger customer base, which is why I want to go over a few things that Apple glossed over or failed to mention in their keynote about this new MacBook Pro. So I want to go over what you need to know before you order this new base model, some limitations of this new model, and if it's really worth it over a MacBook Air, and when you should consider upgrading your MacBook Pro to a higher end configuration. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about this new 14-inch MacBook Pro, because Apple has lowered the price here quite a bit, bringing the base model down from $2,000 to $1,599, which again is going to make this MacBook reach a much wider audience than it used to. Now, Apple didn't just knock off $400 on the MacBook Pro and get it down to a cheaper price point because they're nice people and they're trying to get you the best deal possible, right? They cut some things out of this model, and I think the most notable thing is that the base model no longer comes with a Pro chip, it just comes with the regular M3 chip. And any previous 14-inch MacBook Pros that Apple has released up until this point all came with either the M1 Pro or M2 chip by default. And that M3 chip comes with only 8 gigabytes of memory as opposed to the other M1 Pro and M2 Pro chips defaultly coming with 16 gigabytes of memory. So this is Apple kind of lowering the performance in a way and also reducing the memory on that model to reach that lower price point. Now, yes, the M3 chip is obviously going to have less power than something like the M3 Pro or the M3 Max chips, but based on early Geekbench score leaks, it's actually more powerful than the previous base model that Apple offered in single-core performance. And it's faster than both the M1 Max and M2 Max versions of the MacBook Pro, with a staggering 3,000 single-core score. And in multi-core performance, it's actually stronger than the base model M1 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro, and only slightly behind the $2,000 configuration of the M2 Pro base model version from just 9 months ago at a $400 cheaper price point. So despite using the base M3 chip, it seems on paper that it is a better performance value than previous models. And there's also another benefit to this, and that is what I think most people will appreciate over time, is the additional battery life savings. The M3 chip draws much less power than Apple's Pro or Max chips, and despite this 14-inch model technically having a smaller 70-watt-hour battery compared to the M3 Pro version's 72.4 watt-hour battery, it still has more battery life by a pretty impressive margin. Apple is giving this a 22-hour rating of battery life, which matches exactly with the larger, more expensive 16-inch MacBook Pro model, while the M3 Pro 14-inch model only gets 18 hours of battery life by comparison. And this 22-hour rating is the largest battery life ever in a MacBook, which honestly deserves some serious applause. Good job, Apple. Like, that's people are gonna love that. And I have to give it to Apple here. They probably could have made even more cuts in areas like the display or the speakers, but they didn't. They kept them exactly the same on this base model 14-inch machine. So that 14-inch model gets the reduced bezels around the display, and it also gets the outstanding 120Hz ProMotion Mini LED display, which is the best Mac display that Apple has ever made, hands down. Now, it's not completely the same machine though, because despite Apple bringing in the SD card slot and the HDMI port to this new lower cost model, they dropped one of the Thunderbolt USB-C ports on the right side of the device. And despite this coming with a Thunderbolt port and an HDMI port, the base model M3 MacBook Pro is still only capable of connecting one external monitor max. On top of that, the HDMI on the base model cannot output to an 8K display or a 4K display at 240 Hz like the higher end models can. The M3 is limited to driving an external display at 6K at a 60 Hz refresh rate, which isn't bad, right? Like 6K resolution is very high, 60 Hz is fine for most people. Now, despite design being the same, if you were thinking about getting this new hyped up space black color that Apple literally had like a whole trailer for at their event, well, you're not going to be able to do that on the base M3 model, because if you look at the color selection, Apple is still giving you the same old space gray color that was available on their previous MacBook Pro model. So that new space black color, it comes in at a premium price. You gotta pay more for the new paint job. Now, at $1,599, the MacBook Pro is going to be a great Mac for a lot of users, but I think the biggest direct comparison might not even be another MacBook Pro, but instead something like a MacBook Air. And if you look at the current MacBook Air, you might think, okay, it's a big price drop. It comes in at $1,099, and that seems like a huge price gap between that and the 14-inch MacBook Pro. But the price is actually a lot closer than you think, because if you're getting a similarly spec'd model, because the MacBook Air by default ships with an 8-core M2 GPU instead of the full 10-core version. And it only comes with 256 gigabytes of base storage, while the M3 MacBook Pro comes with not only the full 10-core GPU, but also 512 gigabytes of base storage by default. So to get a similarly spec'd out MacBook Air with the older M2 chip, with the 10-core GPU and 512 gigabytes of storage, the price is actually $1,399, which is only $200 away from the M3 MacBook Pro. And for $200 more, you're getting a more powerful M3 chip on the latest process, and you're getting more ports, better speakers, a bigger and a way better quality display. You do have to sacrifice some trade-offs for thinness and lightness on the MacBook Air, but I think a lot of people would be willing to make that trade-off considering the difference is less than a pound in weight. Another consideration is that new 15-inch MacBook Air, where the price difference is only $100 for a similarly spec'd machine on the 14-inch MacBook Pro, and that is a tough conversation to have because I think despite having a smaller 14-inch display, for $100 more, there's a lot of upgrades on this base 14-inch model that will make it a better laptop. Conversely, there's also going to be people looking at the $1,599 model and wondering if they should spend $400 on the M3 Pro model. And yes, there are some instances where you might want to do that. I think the biggest consideration to make when upgrading is how are you upgrading your Mac? For example, the base M3 model only comes with 8 gigabytes of memory, so if you were planning on upping the memory to 16 gigabytes anyway, well, that only brings you $200 away from the price of an M3 Pro model. The M3 Pro model at the $2,000 price point comes with 18 gigabytes of memory, so you're actually getting 2 more gigabytes of memory, and you're also getting the more powerful M3 Pro chip on top of that. You also have to consider the limitations of the M3 machine. So while the M3 Pro model can max out at 36 gigabytes of memory and 4 terabytes of storage, the regular M3 can only max out at 24 gigabytes of memory and 2 terabytes of storage. And also, the M3 Pro model can connect up to 2 external displays at once, and the HDMI port supports 8K at 60 Hz or 4K at 240 Hz. So it's even more than just performance when you're upgrading to the M3 Pro model. It unlocks other capabilities and additional specs compared to the M3 model. Of course, there's also talk about upgrading to the M3 Max, right? And you could do that on the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro. I'm not going to go into the pros and cons of the 14 and 16-inch Pro because that's not really this video, but yeah, if you want like the cheapest M3 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro, it starts at $3,200. But yeah, if you get an M3 Max, it's going to have even more power, and this time it has even more CPU power over an M3 Pro, as well as GPU power. So these Max models can be configured even higher, right? You can get up to 128 gigabytes of unified memory, that's pretty crazy, and up to 8 terabytes of storage, and if you really need to connect a lot of displays, they are the only MacBook Pros that can connect up to 4 external displays at once. Now, while I'm focusing this video on the base model, if you really work with programs that are CPU or GPU demanding, or you need a certain amount of memory or storage, you should really consider these upgrades for either the M3 Pro or the M3 Max. And honestly, I think for like the best performance this year, it really looks like that M3 Max might be like something special. It looks like an amazing upgrade with all those CPU and GPU cores. But listen, I think the big question I had with this base model when I saw it announced was, is this thing actually going to be a good deal? Because it comes with the base M3 chip. And honestly, at first, I didn't even know if the M3 performance was going to really be worthy of that MacBook Pro name. But don't be fooled. For most people, the M3 model, in my opinion, looks like it's going to be the best deal for a performance to price ratio, and also getting a lot of the great MacBook Pro upgrades that we've come to appreciate with the redesign. Based on those leaked Geekbench scores I mentioned earlier, the M3 performance may not be as fast as the M3 Pro or M3 Max in multi-core CPU or in GPU performance, but it's still just as fast in single-core performance, which is what most people use, and multi-core performance is basically just as fast as the base model M2 Pro chip from 9 months ago. On top of that, you're getting a lot of amazing hardware upgrades on the MacBook Pro. That mini LED ProMotion display is a game changer. It has more ports, and it has the best battery life ever on a MacBook. This just looks like a way better base machine than the older 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro. So yeah, if you're in the market for a cheaper MacBook Pro, This one seems like the one to get, but let me know. What do you think of this new base model MacBook Pro? Do you think it's worth it? And are you considering picking one up? And if you are picking one up, consider using my affiliate link in the description below. Helps the channel out a little bit. And of course, if you need even more information about this machine, don't worry. Old Greg's got you covered. I got the base model on the way, and you can expect full coverage of it as soon as next week. So get subscribed, and I'll catch you in the next one. Let the magic man work his stuff. What?